Hello, and welcome to the offline version of Know Your Cloud, presented at VMware's user group meeting. My name is John White, and I'm the Manager of Sales Engineering for Expedient Communications. For those of you who are not familiar with Expedient, we are a network, data center, and managed service provider with facilities in Boston, Baltimore, Pittsburgh, Cleveland, and our newest location, Columbus. In the past 3 years, cloud computing has become a common practice for the outsourcing of data and compute-centric applications to virtualized technology service providers. Many cloud computing providers have sprung up, each offering services that, while on paper differ slightly, vary greatly in actuality. As organizations from small startups to large global enterprises look to the cloud provider for services, there are key areas which should be reviewed and questions which should be asked to ensure a successful cloud service experience. This presentation will provide an overview of those areas and define a list of questions that every client should ask of their prospective provider. Here's our agenda for today. I'm going to start by giving a brief intro or review for some folks on cloud services. Talk about some of the different types of cloud providers, and then we're going to cover my thoughts and sample questions for getting to know your cloud. So what is cloud computing? The National Institute of Standards and Technology defines it as such. Cloud computing is a model for enabling convenient, on-demand network access to a shared pool of configurable computing resources. For example, networks, servers, storage, applications, and services that can be rapidly provisioned and released with minimal management effort or service provider interaction. Or, to sum it up, flexible hosted resource pools delivered on the internet. Let's take a look at the different types of clouds available. The private or internal cloud is the type that most everyone is familiar with. This cloud sits at your data center or in a third-party data center, and it is solely utilized by your company. In this model, you're responsible for the hardware and software that runs your infrastructure. Public cloud, or also known as external cloud, is a cloud hosted off-site by a third-party provider. Typically, the resources you'll be provisioned are shared among multiple companies. Some of the main providers you might hear about offering this service today are GoGrid, Amazon, SliceHost, Rackspace, and there are plenty more. Hybrid cloud is going to be a mix of public and private clouds. Companies might utilize a private cloud for their primary site and then replicate to a public cloud as their secondary site to get more of a cost-effective disaster recovery scenario. For today's discussion, we're going to be focusing on the public cloud offering. So what are some of the benefits of the cloud? Cost is always one of them. In the cloud, you have a reduced cost. You have little to no upfront infrastructure investments to get started. Companies simply purchase the resources they need when they need it. IT focus. No longer having to worry about the constant server updates and other computing issues, organizations will be free to concentrate on innovation. Flexibility. As business needs change, it is easy to scale up or down any of the resources provided by the third-party company. Companies can quickly replicate existing environments for load testing or development. Availability. SLAs are created to guarantee your application is up and running all the time. If for some reason it is not, there will be a penalty to the provider. When investigating third-party co-location facilities, companies simplified their need. They no longer had to worry about all the problems that go into running their own facility. They simply needed to understand the resources they required to run their environment. The key resources were power, space, and cooling. The cloud is very similar. Companies now are simply purchasing processor, memory, and disk space. And they're purchasing only what they need today, not what they need in the future, because they can pay for that in incremental growth. There are 6 key areas to consider when selecting a cloud provider. These general areas need to be reviewed with each cloud service provider to make sure they have the appropriate platforms and processes to support the technology, data, and applications being migrated to them. Take a look at the rules. We're going to be reviewing each of them in detail. Rule number 1. Inspect what you expect of your cloud provider. A key element of the cloud provider is the underlying technology platforms supporting the cloud service. Just as a prospective client would inquire about facility specifications for colocation services, the same types of questions need to be asked of the cloud provider. A prospective client should inquire to the software, hardware, and underlying facilities that are utilized in providing the service. The provider may defer to their SLA, explaining that the infrastructure information is confidential and isn't the client's concern. The problem with accepting this response is that even the richest of service level agreements can't cover the cost to the business if the service becomes unavailable for multiple hours or days, or worse, the data becomes lost. Providers are unlikely to realign their SLAs to cover their business loss in case of an outage, so it is important for the client to ensure that the environment is properly built. Over the past few months of investigating some of these cloud providers, I've noticed a big difference in what it means to be highly available. Some cloud providers interpret it as having hardware redundancy in place and software like high availability from VMware to quickly fail a virtual machine to an active host. Others refer to high availability by providing the customer with the ability to create multiple application servers and then utilize load balancing at the application layer. Either works, but it might not work for all companies. Rule number 2. Not everything can fit in the cloud, so make sure you can put things right next to it. Not all platforms are ready to live in the cloud. Organizations may have platforms running on hardware such as IBM AS400 or a Sun UltraSpark system that they're not ready to migrate off of. Additionally, there may be x86 elements in the environment which can't live in the cloud. Platforms such as Oracle RAC or databases which require sub-second data tracking. Due to this need, it is important to ensure that the cloud provider has a physical colocation facet of services in conjunction with their cloud services. If platforms in the cloud need to speak to applications on other platforms which can't be in the cloud, it is important to have flexibility of physical colocation to ensure successful interoperation. Rule number 3. You can't manage what you can't measure. One aspect of cloud computing that is still being developed is performance criteria metrics for the cloud. When one looks at server resources in the cloud, there are typically 5: network, memory, disk I/O, and compute cycles. Cloud providers can easily articulate the network, memory, and disk. However, I/O and compute cycles have a significant impact on performance and are much harder to describe. Luckily, there are sites out there like CloudHarmony.com that are providing active benchmark statistics for some of the top cloud providers. To safeguard against poor performance, clients should make sure the cloud services come with a monitoring package that details the amount of each of the resources being consumed. Clients should test their workload in the cloud provider's environment to ensure the environment will meet the workload's needs and monitor the resources consumed as a baseline. That baseline should be captured and used as a reference point later if performance degrades. One sales pitch of the cloud is elasticity. How will your application respond in the cloud during spikes or peak load? A bigger question, what will happen to your environment when your neighbor's resource spikes? Rule number 4. Handoff points can be major headaches for both processes and for technology. There's a demarcation point of what the cloud provider is responsible for and what the customer is responsible for. But as any service, there's always a little bit of gray. This is where the majority of the support and service issues arise. It is important for the client to know that the cloud provider has a skilled service and support staff that understands the operating platforms being run, that there are a clear set of engagement rules for troubles which may or may not be cloud related. Without this understanding, when a gray area issue comes up, this troubleshooting is almost always more painful. Rule number 5. Management automation is great, but it needs to be portable. As cloud environments grow in complexity, the use of application programming interfaces, or APIs, will start to become the norm to manage and maintain the cloud environment. Today, many cloud providers have published APIs and other access interfaces to manage their services, and customers are beginning to interact with them. It's important for the client to understand that this can later create a barrier to transition to another cloud provider. If work is done to integrate with a proprietary interface, that development effort on behalf of the client will need to be duplicated to move to another provider. While today not a significant issue, this will move to the forefront as the cloud and cloud-based services develop. Rule number 6. Auditors still need to audit. New regulations and standards are being created as information technology environments continue to contain more personal, private, and sensitive data. This ultimately means information technology environments will be more subject to both internal and external audits. The notion of accepting only a SAS 70 audit or the new SSAE 16 will not be enough to satisfy auditors in the future. So it's important for the client to understand what regulations are coming, how they affect the IT environment, and what the cloud provider will do in support of the client's audits. It's important that you present the cloud provider the audit standards scoped to their involvement and ask for commitment in writing as part of the contract to ensure a positive audit experience. One critical element that seems to get skipped is the disclosure of the data's location. If this is important to your company, make sure that the cloud provider can give you this information. That wraps up my 6 rules to getting to know your cloud. Feel free to use this document as a starting point for your investigation. Most likely you're going to get much more detailed than this presentation, but always keep some of these basic points in mind. My last piece of advice is to start testing some of the cloud providers that are out there. Almost every cloud provider will offer a free trial. Within minutes, you can start to get comfortable with creating a server, network, and uploading your data to it. Thank you for watching Expedient's presentation on Know Your Cloud. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact us through our website at www.expedient.com. Thank you.